Chapter 20 Aggregate Demand and Aggregate Supply. Let us remind ourselves of the economic fluctuations or business cycles that we have discussed in previous chapters. We know that the fluctuations in economic activity from year to year are irregular and largely unpredictable. Recently, we have seen the impacts of events such as the aftermath of COVID-19, China's shutdown and subsequent reopening of markets, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. These events have caused supply disruptions, leading to inflation. When supply falls, we experience cost push inflation. Additionally, the hike in interest rates by the Federal Reserve has significant impacts on our everyday lives. Households are now finding it difficult to borrow for new loans, and those with mortgage loans and credit cards are facing high interest rates. Can we predict when this burden will end? Unfortunately, there's no simple answer to this question. We need to understand the tools that the government uses under economic policies to combat these economic fluctuations. Let's also remind ourselves what a recession is. A recession is a contraction in economic activities characterized by two consecutive quarters of falling real incomes, output levels, or GDP, and rising unemployment. In more severe cases, we have a depression. Historically, the Great Depression of 1929 was the longest, deepest, and most widespread depression of the 20th century. Between 1929 and 1932, worldwide GDP fell by an estimated 15%. By comparison, worldwide GDP fell by less than 1% during the Great Recession from 2008 to 2009. In our study of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, it is crucial to understand the assumptions in the model. Monetary neutrality is not appropriate here, meaning that real variables like real GDP, real consumption, and employment, and nominal variables like the price level, wages, and exchange rates are highly intertwined. Changes in the money supply can temporarily push real GDP away from its long-run trend. Let us revisit the economic fluctuations or business cycles as presented on the graphs. Take a look at the graph in panel A. We have seen this one already. It shows the cycle where the peak happens when the economy is running very well at its highest point. After the peak, the economy can face a contraction, or we call it a recession. Once it falls to the bottom of the recession, it is called the trough. After that, it can rise back up, and we can call this the recovery phase. The vertical bar on the trajectory represents a period of recession. Again, this is the economic fluctuation or business cycle that occurs in any economy, whether advanced or poor. Next, the graph in panel B showcases the trajectory of investment spending. Look at the period of 2008-2009, which marks the Great Recession. It shows a massive decline in investment spending. And lastly, the graph in panel C showcases the trajectory of the unemployment rate. Again, during the Great Recession of 2008-2009, it shows a significant rise in the unemployment rate. Here we discuss the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, or ADAS model. Understanding the ADAS model helps us comprehend short-run fluctuations in economic activity. Take a look at the graph and recall the basics of demand and supply. The vertical axis represents the price level, such as the price index like CPI, rather than the single price as we discussed in basic demand and supply. The horizontal axis represents the output level or real GDP, instead of the quantity in a single market that we saw in basic demand and supply. Let me explain the origin of the ADAS model. It is a byproduct of the Great Depression. A great economist, John Maynard Keynes, wrote his book in 1936, The General Theory of Employment, Interest Rate, and Money. In this book, he argued that the recession or depression can always occur because of inadequate aggregate demand for goods and services. He famously stated, in the long run, we are all dead. So Keynes advocated for policies to increase aggregate demand by boosting government spending on public works. In studying the ADAS model, we are essentially learning about the Keynesian theory. We kick off with learning about aggregate demand. Similar to basic demand, aggregate demand is downward sloping, indicating an inverse relationship between the price level and output level, and it is a one-way directional only. Why is that? In basic demand, we leave it to the law of demand. However, in aggregate demand, we can prove the inverse relationship through three scenarios: the wealth effect under the consumption spending channel, the interest rate effect under the investment spending channel, and the exchange rate effect under the net export channel. To explain this economic intuition, we need to show that a decrease in the price level will end up with an increase in the output level. Let us recall the GDP equation, y equals c plus I plus g plus nx. You can think of AD as the GDP equation. Any components affecting y can pass through AD as well. Let's discuss the wealth effect. Suppose that the price level decreases, the real value of money increases, resulting in an increase in purchasing power. Because of this effect, households are likely to spend more on their consumption, and total consumption spending will increase. Since C increases, according to the GDP equation, Y or the output level will increase accordingly. Next, the interest rate effect. Again, let's start with a decrease in the price level. Money in possession is abundant, so households will try to reduce their holdings of money by lending some out. They will seek to invest the excess money into interest-bearing assets in the lending market or the loanable funds market. As households try to convert some of their money into interest-bearing assets, the interest rate will drop. Lower interest rates encourage firms to borrow more to invest in new plants and equipment, and encourage households to borrow more to invest in new housing. Thus, a lower price level reduces the interest rate, encourages greater spending on investment goods, and therefore increases the output level. And lastly, the exchange rate effect. A lower price level in the US lowers the US interest rate. Some US investors will seek higher returns by investing abroad, increasing US net capital outflow. The increase in net capital outflow raises the supply of dollars, causing the dollar to depreciate in foreign exchange markets. Then US goods become relatively cheaper compared to foreign goods, causing exports to rise, imports to fall, and net exports to increase. Eventually, the output level will rise. Therefore, we can see that a decrease in the price level will eventually result in an increase in the output level under the implications of these three effects. Now let us discuss the factors that shift the AD curve, starting with changes in consumption spending. For example, suppose that consumer confidence or consumer sentiment collapses, households will cut down their spending, so consumption spending will fall, and hence the output level will also fall accordingly. In such a case, the AD curve will shift leftward. A different scenario is when there is a reduction in the tax rate. Households will take advantage by increasing their spending, so consumption spending will rise, and hence the output level will rise accordingly. In such a case, the AD curve will shift rightward. Next, changes in investment spending. If there is pessimism about future business conditions, like another pandemic hitting again, firms will cut down their investment spending in new plants or equipment, and the upper level will fall as well. Consequently, AD will shift leftward. However, if we look at a case of investment tax credit, such that in the US, if firms keep investing in new plants and equipment, the government will award them with tax credit. This will encourage firms to keep spending further, and hence the output level will rise. Consequently, AD will shift rightward. Then changes in government spending. If the state or the federal government decides to build more highways, it will create jobs for the households. They will use the income to spend on consumption, causing the output level to rise. Consequently, AD will shift rightward. And the last one, changes in net exports. Suppose there is a recession overseas, exports to those foreign countries will drop, causing the domestic output level to fall. Consequently, AD will shift leftward. However, when those countries recover, exports to them will rise, causing the domestic output level to increase. Consequently, AD will shift rightward. And how about speculation in the exchange rate? If the dollar appreciates, net exports will collapse because exports fall as foreign countries find domestic goods more expensive to purchase, but imports rise as domestic consumers can buy foreign goods at a cheaper price than in domestic markets. Then the upper level will fall accordingly, and AD will shift leftward. Now let us switch gears and discuss aggregate supply. When discussing aggregate supply, we need to consider both long-run aggregate supply and short-run aggregate supply. The long-run aggregate supply curve is represented as a vertical line. This indicates that the price level does not affect the long-run determinants of GDP or output level. Instead, the supplies of labor, capital, and natural resources, essentially the production function inputs, equipped with technological knowledge, are the main determinants of growth in GDP or output level. In contrast, the short-run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping, indicating a positive relationship between the price level and GDP or output level. Here we begin with factors that can shift the long-run aggregate supply. This discussion aligns with classical economics perspectives, which differ from the Keynesian theory. As mentioned earlier, the long-run aggregate supply curve is a vertical line, indicating that the price level does not impact the output level. The position of this line is called the natural rate of output. Factors that shift the long-run aggregate supply forward, leading to economic expansion, are the factors of production only. First, changes in labor. An increase in the labor force, such as through immigration, can quickly expand the labor supply. Next, changes in capital. Capital stock can be increased through foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. Then changes in natural resources. This can be achieved by importing natural resources from abroad. And lastly, changes in technological knowledge. Promoting technological innovation and opening up more free trade can enhance technological knowledge and productivity. Let us now discuss the short-run aggregate supply and understand why it is represented as an upward sloping curve. This can be explained using the theories of sticky wages and sticky prices. According to the sticky wage theory, if the actual price level turns out to be lower than the expected price level, businesses experience reduced profits and thus have an incentive to produce less output. Conversely, if the actual price level exceeds the expected price level, resulting in increased profits, firms are motivated to increase their output. Under the sticky price theory, economic fluctuations reveal that the prices of some goods and services adjust slowly to changing economic conditions. For example, if the price level falls, many firms might attempt to lower their prices to stay competitive. However, if some firms have high menu costs and cannot adjust their prices quickly, they may experience a decrease in sales. This leads these firms to reduce their production. Now we can consider the long-run equilibrium where the aggregate demand curve intersects both the short-run aggregate supply curve and the long-run aggregate supply curve. The long-run equilibrium is achieved when these three curves intersect at a single point. At this intersection, the aggregate demand curve and the long-run aggregate supply curve determine the natural rate of output, which corresponds to full employment, or the natural rate of unemployment, along with the actual price level. Additionally, the intersection of the aggregate demand and short-run aggregate supply curves indicates that the expected price level is equal to actual price level, ensuring that there are no surprises or deviations from expectations in the economy. Here we are looking to examine some shifts in the ADAS model. Let us consider a scenario where the aggregate demand falls to pessimism in the market. This shift causes the AD curve to move leftward from AD1 to AD2. Initially, the economy is at equilibrium at point A, where the aggregate demand, long-run aggregate supply, and short-run aggregate supply intersect. Following the shift in AD, the new equilibrium at point B will result in a decrease in both the price level and output level, with price level dropping from P1 to P2 and output level decreasing from Y1 to Y2. Over time, as the expected price level adjusts downward, nominal wages will also decrease, according to the sticky wage theory. This reduction in nominal wages will encourage firms to increase investment spending in their operations. Consequently, the short-run aggregate supply curve will shift rightward from short-run aggregate supply 1 to short-run aggregate supply 2. This rightward shift of the short-run aggregate supply curve will move the equilibrium from point B to point C, resulting in a further decline in the price level to P3, where the output level recovers back to Y1. Time to proceed with the quiz. Question number 1. A sudden increase in business pessimism shifts the aggregate what curve, leading to what output? Business pessimism typically leads to a contraction in investment spending, which is a component of aggregate demand in the GDP equation. This negative impact on investment spending causes a decrease in aggregate demand and thus lowers the output level. So the answer is C. Question number 2. Stagflation is caused by what? Stagflation combines stagnation, that is no growth in output, and inflation, that is increase in price level. As you see on the graph, a contraction in the short-run aggregate supply results in higher price levels and lower output levels. Therefore, the answer is C. Stagflation is caused by a leftward shift in the aggregate supply curve. Question number 3. The aggregate demand curve slopes downward because a fall in the price level causes what? As demonstrated, the aggregate demand curve slopes downward due to the wealth effect, the interest rate effect, and the exchange rate effect. Specifically, a decrease in the price level results in a decline in the interest rate. Thus, the answer is B, the interest rate to decline. Question number 4. One reason the short-run aggregate supply curve slopes upward is that a higher price level can cause what? Remember that the real wage is derived from nominal wages adjusted for inflation. If nominal wages are sticky and do not adjust immediately, an increase in the price level will reduce real wages, leading firms to increase output. Therefore, the answer is D. Question number 5. A change in which of the following would shift the short-run aggregate supply curve but not the long-run aggregate supply curve? The only factor that affects the short-run aggregate supply but not the long-run aggregate supply is the expected price level. Factors such as the labor force, capital stock, and state of technology influence the long-run aggregate supply. Thus, the answer is D. Question number 6. For each of the following events, explain the short-run and long-run effects on output and price level. Assuming policymakers take no action, use diagrams to illustrate your answers. A. The stock market declines sharply, reducing consumers' wealth. In the short run, a sharp decline in the stock market reduces consumers' wealth, leading to decreased consumption and investment spending. This results in a leftward shift of the aggregate demand curve, causing both the price level and output level to fall. In the long run, as the price level decreases, nominal wages will adjust downward. This adjustment benefits firms, allowing them to increase production. Consequently, the short-run aggregate supply curve will shift rightward. This shift results in a further decrease in the price level while the output level restores to its original position. B. A technological improvement raises productivity. In the short run, a technological improvement increases productivity, which shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve rightward. This leads to a decrease in the price level and an increase in the output level. In the long run, technological improvements also shift the long-run aggregate supply curve rightward, reinforcing the long-run effects of lower price levels and higher output level. C. A recession overseas causes foreigners to buy fewer U.S. goods. In the short run, a recession overseas reduces foreign demand for U.S. goods, leading to a decrease in net exports. This causes the aggregate demand curve to shift leftward, resulting in a decrease in both the price level and output level. In the long run, as the price level falls, nominal wages will adjust downward. Firms will take advantage of lower wages to increase production, causing the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift rightward. This results in a further decrease in the price level while the output level restores to its original position. Here, let us undertake the case study. Case study number 1, oil and the economy. Let me take you through the history of oil shocks. Oil shocks occur when there is a sudden drop in the supply of oil. This leads to higher production costs for firms, which in turn may cause them to reduce production or cut back on investment spending. Consequently, the short-run aggregate supply curve shifts leftward, resulting in a substantial rise in the price level. For example, in the mid-1970s, the OPEC, which is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, reduced oil production due to political moderations, which significantly increased crude oil prices. This had a dramatic impact on the U.S. economy, leading to inflation rates exceeding 10%. and an increase in the unemployment from 4.9% in 1973 to 8.5% in 1975. However, by the late 1980s, the OPEC began to lose control as members started to cheat and increase oil supply, which caused the crude oil prices to drop. This led to a rightward shift in the short-run aggregate supply curve, resulting in decreased inflation and lower unemployment rates. Case study number 2, the Great Recession of 2008-2009. The Great Recession was preceded by a housing boom, fueled by low interest rates and heavy portfolio investment from abroad in the mortgage market. However, between 2006 and 2009, housing values plummeted by 30%, leading to substantial defaults and significant losses in mortgage-backed securities. Financial institutions responded by cutting back on lending, which caused a credit crunch. The shift in financial conditions led to a leftward shift in the aggregate demand curve, resulting in a fall in upper levels and a substantial rise in unemployment.